Welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 758, the Qatar Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's what I need you to do. We're going to review the Qatar Grand Prix. You know how we do this.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. We always talk about it, but before talking about it, I have to introduce my guest tonight, which of course means...
Ripped from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
It's the International. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. You still
Finally had a weekend
buoyed
at home.
by the petite success and winning petite?
Yeah.
Still living that?
Still. There's a lot going on still. We had the GT4 team racing at Sebring in the 24 hours of Sebring, which sounds madness to me, but
Yeah.
I wasn't down there. But that car was doing quite well also until 2 hours to go. It was leading, and then the gearbox broke. So there you go. But 24 hours around Sebring, God,
Yeah.
that's brutal.
pummeling.
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
That's
nowadays, it really is worse than it used to be. Last time I raced there, it was bumpy, but a couple of track walks later recently, and I'm like, woof. Oh, there's the ramp. Yeah.
So that'll shake the fillings out of your teeth.
Yes.
Yeah. So probably no surprise there that the gearboxes, everything goes to a punishment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough. You just don't know. One little bump in the wrong place while shifting gear or something, and it all goes horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah. So it's not quite that smooth, interconnected, medium and high speed turns like the Qatar the Losail circuit was.
Not quite. No, I think the Qatar circuit is more like the go-kart track I was at on Sunday, actually. So I liked it. I like this track. Did you? I mean, I know someone stated, I think on Facebook, on the Parc Fermé Facebook, this track is boring to watch, and I as a driver I liked it. I liked watching the inboards. I could see how you had to be so precise, and how much entry speed, mid corner speed, lateral grip, every single corner after corner, and you just had to get it right, and the car had to be right. So I think as a driver, it was probably a pretty fun deal to do just on a solo lap on your own, let alone racing with other people.
Yeah, I think most of the drivers said they really enjoyed racing on it. It's all these flowing corners and a lot of high speed and
no Mickey
flat
Mouse.
through those, no Mickey Mouse section. I think they all kind of liked it quite a bit. I guess the one danger zone was those green and white curbs behind the first curb that started creating
Curb
havoc.
Strike.
Yes.
Yeah,
Curb
it's gonna be
strike.
the next movie. Yeah, Curb Strike, Qatar.
Curb strike. Look
The
out.
Revenge.
The revenge. Yeah. Curb strike is back, and this time it's personal. Crazy. Well, let's talk
What's
about
her name? Jamie Curtis in her Pirelli outfit, trying to fight off the demons.
Yes. That would be a good episode.
I'm going to write that off right after this episode. I'm going to write the script for that baby.
You should.
Said I'm going to pick Jamie Lee Curtis when she was 20, not when she's
right.
80 or
You
whatever.
can always go like Chuck Heston in that Omega Man era,
Ooh, yeah,
Omega
yes.
Man, yeah. There's an
Soylent-
oldie but a goodie.
They're Soylent Green either way.
It's people. It's one of the greatest people. Yes, that would be good. It would be good. Well, it was an interesting race in Qatar, and I want to talk about a couple of the elements. Look, Mercedes has a track record, folks, on new circuits. They just do, and so does Lewis. And come Saturday, it was clear that the pace they had in Brazil had kind of carried over to Qatar for sure. Despite the medium and high-speed corners in the middle part, they were still wickedly fast. What's interesting is that the pace that the team have achieved in the last couple of races, now I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but the straight line speed and gap they put on Red Bull in Brazil was around 0.9, towards the end of that, close to 0.9 a lap. And now in Qatar, it's astounding. It was astounding. And it makes you wonder, have they been running a shorter wick all season. I'm not necessarily suggesting that they're a second a lap faster. I think, Paul and you and I were talking about, I think you're more realistic. It could be 2-3 tenths
Yeah,
quicker, but that's a huge
for sure.
gain. 2 tenths, 3 tenths per lap is a huge gain, and it would just become untenable for Red Bull or anyone else really to overcome. And it's pretty surprising how much pace they gained. I mean, if I was like a tinfoil hat theory, conspiracy theorist, I'd almost say that we're either being played by F1 to keep the title close throughout the season, or Mercedes played the mother of all sandbags.
Yeah.
And I'm inclined to kind of go along, I'm tracking here, and you tell me what you think, but I'm sort of tracking here a little bit with what Mark Hughes said in Brazil, where he kind of felt that they introduced that fifth engine so they could actually have that fourth and fifth engine run them a little hotter than they
Hmm.
normally had been, because I guess the reality of it, the engine itself was experienced a lot of wear and performance degradation if they ran them too hot. And so in this case, they could run the wick a little longer, having that backup fifth engine. And maybe that's what we're seeing. Maybe we're
Yeah.
seeing Mercedes being able to turn up the engine a little bit and go that route. Not quite sure.
Yeah. I think there could be some truth to that. I mean, I think, they know their engines better than we do, and they know
Yeah.
what they can and can't handle. They've got nothing to lose by being trying to push. I mean, he's second in the championship right now. I mean, although constructors is awful tight still, so you do want reliability for that. But
Yeah.
even though for the manufacturers that is where the money is, still the glamour is in the driver's title, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's still an important thing for the teams, no matter which way you look at it. So, I mean, I theorized a couple of years ago when these whole engine allocation things came in, was just accept the fact you're going to change a couple of engines,
Yeah.
and just push, because
Yeah.
it's going to happen. No one's going to get three engines to last the season. So accept that fact and plan out your strategy for the beginning of the year for when you're going to introduce these engines now, because the engines aren't completely frozen. They are, but they're not, right?
Yeah.
Some of these engines can take some evolution during the season. You don't want to start at the first Grand Prix and throw two engines in there, because those engines, technology wise and progression wise, won't be what you really want to have in the car at the end of the season. So you got
Right.
to plan it out. And I think a few races ago, I think Mercedes saw where they were at, and I think they kind of put in a strategy here to include a couple extra engines, and so they can turn the work up and take it to max, because they need to do something to change the course, and they've
Yeah.
done something to change that course now, right?
Yeah, for sure. They really have. And now you've got kind of a situation where their pace advantage down the straight. I think Christian Horner was saying it was bad enough in Brazil, but it was even worse here.
Yeah, I can imagine. But to be
Yeah.
fair, I mean, riding in car with Lewis, that car was handling awfully good too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Honestly, in qualifying, that car was pretty hooked up. And
yeah.
sometimes but it all comes with, they all work with each other, right? You get that extra engine power. You can maybe add a bit more downforce, a little more drag to make the car actually better through the corners too. So it's a double whammy, so to speak. And yeah, watching Verstappen's car, he was kind of, didn't have that grip that I was seeing from Lewis Hamilton. So
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of, they got more power, they can put a bit more downforce, so therefore they were kind of superior nearly everywhere, at least with Lewis behind the wheel.
Yeah, well, if you got more shove in the back, you can put more wing on, get more grip, And
Yeah.
the tire issue was interesting because the tracks seemed to be harder on the front tires than maybe they were anticipating, and in particular, the front left. With Pirelli's Mario Isola saying, "quote We saw that a big part of it was that there are several corners where you're braking into the turn,
Mm,
so turning in with a lot of combined load on the tires, longitudinal and lateral. This always takes a lot from a front tire, and in particular that front left tire, and that would lead me to think that maybe, Paul, that that may have been part of Red Bull's challenge, is that it was a lot harder on the front tires than maybe they seem to do well when they get the rear tires in that heat temperature window and get that grip level out of the rear more so than the fronts. And maybe that was sort of Red Bull's challenge in this weekend anyway, having so much load and everything on the front.
Yeah. They definitely seemed like Max couldn't hold the proper line. It seemed like the front was chasing out. Now, although it did occur to me that sometimes that's a little deceiving, because if you're in a car where the back end wants to jump out on you very quickly going into a corner, you kind of have to straighten the wheel a little bit, maybe make that curve a little longer so you're not just fighting the rear end all the way through the corner. I'm not quite sure what's going on. It seemed like more like understeer than just kind of straightening the car up so the back end doesn't swap around. But either way, there was definitely an imbalance in the car that just, he didn't give him the chance to fight, really. As you say, the difference was quite big, and Lewis obviously didn't have to push any harder than he needed to push. And so even though the gap was 8-7 seconds near the end before Max went in there to do his hot lap there, I think Hamilton still had a lot more left to use if he needed it.
Yeah, for sure. There was another issue also heading into the race with a penalty for Valtteri Bottas and Max Verstappen nearly 24 hours after qualifying. And, it caught me off guard when I tuned in for the race on Sunday and said, okay, well, Bottas and Verstappen both have a penalty. One was a 3 grid, or I don't know what it was. That was
3 and 5, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, what? Okay, so this is from qualifying? This is from Saturday? I don't understand. Bernie Ecclestone used to always, he used to continually argue that fans deserve and should know the outcome of a session on that day.
Right.
Waiting for a full day to assess new penalties just is not good for the sport. It's not good for the fans, regardless if it's the right or wrong call. And this leads me wondering just a little bit about how tight a rein Michael Massey has on this sport. I know it's not easy. It's not an easy job that he's doing, and I get that. But I agree with Bernie. He used to be furious when things would upset the running order, either in qualifying or race, and that you didn't know who won the race at the end of the day. He would be furious about that. And he was always saying that the fans deserve better. We should know at the end of the session definitively what happened and how they finished. And I tend to agree with him, Paul. I think Martin Brundle made some really good points in the Sky, broadcast, when he was saying that, for Valtteri and Max both, the DRS was reinactivated. There was nothing on their steering wheel showing it. Although, as you said, you come around the corner, you can clearly see the yellows. And, Martin was arguing when you come around that corner, you're focused on the car that's slowing down on the right-hand side, not the Marshall stand on the left. And so regardless, if there are yellow flags, there are yellow flags. And it seems to me that Michael and the F1 stewards could have went back on Saturday and saw the footage and saw the yellow flags and made the call on Saturday. But to wait 24 hours later or thereabouts, I don't know. That just left a sour taste in my mouth over that.
Yes, Todd. Thank you for your message. I'll take that under advisement. I'll pass it on, and we'll have a little chat about it. Okay.
We're looking at it, Jonathan. Thank you very much. We'll look into it, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be having tea in a minute, and we'll discuss it.
Thank you very much.
We're having bourbons. And
send up any spare crumpets if you have them.
Yeah. Brundle's right? You're looking through a corner, you're not looking for flags. You're looking, you're trying to eke out the fastest way you've been around that corner all weekend long. Why there's nothing happening on the dash, I'm not really sure. But it's because that should be very clear and should happen instantaneously, really. So there was a goof up there. From watching from the outside, I was curious as to why they finished the lap myself, and I was like, maybe because Gasly had passed the finish line, it didn't count because he was out of the way of the actual. It was far enough down the road where it didn't affect him, but obviously that wasn't the case, because it was a little confusing at that time why that wasn't instantaneous. Even more confusing why it takes a day, because it's not just us not knowing, it's the teams not knowing. I mean, they're sitting there till midnight. Lewis is sitting there till midnight, evidently, trying to figure out the strategy for the race. Right. And if all of a sudden you find out, oh, well, you're going to be starting back there now, things are going to change. So I think it's unfair for the teams. I don't think it's good for the fans to all of a sudden be surprised by a penalty that is pretty self-evident at that moment in time. It's not like they got to keep measuring the wing. There's inconclusive evidence because of this or that. Seemed pretty conclusive. They should have just done it and moved on.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't lift under double wave yellows, you didn't lift, and that's a penalty. Yeah. Fair enough. But call it on the day. That was well, let's talk about the race and how they finished. Certainly Mercedes up at the sharp end of the grid. Lewis Hamilton P1, Valtteri Bottas a DNF. Lewis continued his dominant pace and performance in Qatar with a commanding pole on Saturday, and then an even better race victory. Terrific pace. He had a great start, and he kept the lead the entire race. In fact, just 17 laps into the race, Paul, he already had a half a minute on everyone else but Max. And by the end, he was about a full minute clear of everyone but Verstappen. And even Max was 25 seconds behind him. Now, to be fair, Max made that late stop for softs, but even so, he was running between 8 and 10 seconds behind Lewis by the end. Yep. Lewis is just, absolute dominant performance in that car. That car was completely hooked up. Pace was there, plenty of shove. He's just 8 points behind Max in the title. And given that he only had to do what was required to keep that gap, it's not looking good for Red Bull heading into these last two races. Lewis seems to be absolutely on fire with those new engines. And Toto saying that, in the next race they get their spicy engine back. Not quite sure what that is, but I would imagine that's party mode all over.
Yeah. No, he was hooked up. I mean, at the beginning of the weekend, it looked a little sketchy in the car.
It did, yeah.
But then they figured it out pretty quick. And by qualifying, that car was just on rails, as you say. So, And I think Max was having to overdrive a little bit to even get close. He just did. It just wasn't there. And you could see Max was trying as hard as he could, and Lewis was trying only as hard as he needs to. So, the combination is working out great. They've got the car handling well. They've got the power in the back, and Lewis is as fit as he's ever been. So he's on the ball too. I mean, his focus is ahead, right? It's easy for him. It's going to be a little less easy these last two races because he's got to kind of protect himself too. Because if he gets any issues and he's out, then that's kind of nearly handing a championship away. So the last two races can be a little different. Up until this point is when all they had to do was win. You just got to win. Win. Yeah. There's nothing, and that's what they've done, and it's got them right in the hunt, in the chase for it. So kudos to the team and Lewis on his side of the garage. Certainly, firing on all cylinders. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. His teammate, not so much. Valtteri had a bad day, and it's odd because he looked really good on Friday, actually, but he couldn't deliver on Saturday. And in the race, he had a poor start and ultimately got a call from Toto on the radio to pick it up from P11.
Do not want to hear that.
You don't. It's one thing to have your race engineer call you, but when Toto says, all right, come on, Valtteri, pick it up. It's like,
two races in a row.
Yeah, right. He was down.
I'm down, Valtteri. I'm trying.
Sorry, sir. So anyway, he was down to P11. Now, the call did prompt him to pass a few cars. He did. Got in the hunt for third, but a puncture ended his race, and they retired the car with damage, and it was his fourth DNF of the season. So not going well for Valtteri on Sunday, Paul. And now he's... I don't know. Of course, if I'm Valtteri and you got Toto said, all right, pick it up, go get him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that wasn't what took to get Bottas to light a fire under it.
I agree.
I mean, we saw once he did get moving, the car had pace, the
Yeah.
pace that Lewis was kind of showing, but he was just sitting back there, man. And he got a hellacious start. I was watching the in-car, his revs were saying too low. I don't know if that was just the moment before and he raised his revs, but he didn't fire off the line. He got a little wheel spin, so he upshifted super quick between fourth and fifth.
Yeah.
Didn't help, just going backwards the whole way, and then really timid, I would say, amongst all the other cars around him. As it kind of puts you in a bad situation if you don't look forward and don't be more aggressive, and he just seems a bit timid, and I don't know why it's that way. But once everything's stretched out and everything, and he could pick cars off one by one, but by then he was already half a minute behind the lead pack anyway. And that's exactly what Lewis needed both these past two races. Lewis is worried where Bottas is. Why? Because they need Bottas to be ahead of Max. If Bottas had been second, then where would we be in the championship right now? It might be evens, right? So Bottas's job is very important, and Lewis knows that. That's why he's questioning it. And to know that Valtteri's back in P11, after 2 laps, is like, Lewis probably like, geez.
Yeah. You'd like to heard what Lewis's thought was when they told him, when he asked where Valtteri was, and they said P11. I'm thinking, oh, crap.
He's like,
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I had a dream, actually, the night after the race where Toto was like, okay, Valtteri, sorry, but we're putting Russell in early.
Yeah. Just to get to the end of the season and get
we need something to happen, and you're not making it happen. So I know it wouldn't happen, but it would be an interesting turn of events should you choose to do that. But I don't know what's going on with Valtteri. Struggling. He shows speed sometimes, like really good speed, but traffic is not his friend.
No, it's not. And just to revisit the pace, I mean, as the fight tightens towards the end, there's certainly a lot of accusations, hints, allegations, and innuendos, from Red Bull or others. But apart from who's complaining, it doesn't really matter. I am generally intrigued by the massive gain in pace by Mercedes. But to be fair, Ferrari made a significant engine upgrade on their last engine that they introduced, and that's vaulted them ahead of McLaren in the title fight. But then again, McLaren has a Mercedes engine. So why, if Mercedes has this huge jump in performance, I'm wondering, where McLaren's jump is with their Mercedes. And
I don't know what the rules are, right?
I don't either.
Who gets the allocations, and does it mean McLaren, to get this new hot motor, do they need to do an engine change? If it's hard of his rotation, or as we're theorizing, is it just a matter of he's got enough engines in his bay that he can turn the wick up that they are not willing to do because they don't want to take an engine penalty in these last 2 races?
Or was McLaren given a menu and they didn't order the spicy engine?
That's right. They just got the emails from other companies.
Yeah.
Other Mercedes
they've
companies.
got the mild engine. It's like a Taco Bell hot sauce package. It's like, we'll just take the milds. I don't want the super spicy.
It's spicy.
Yeah. I don't know. But despite the conspiracy theories and accusations, I've watched F1 for decades now, and this is a big performance turnaround, folks. So watch this space. But it's super impressive. Let's talk about Red Bull. Max in P2, Sergio Perez in P4. It was a mirror result of what they had last week with P2, Max and P2, Sergio and P4. A little more difficult this weekend to get the P2 and P4 with that pre-race late penalty on Sunday afternoon for the yellow flag penalty on Saturday. And this meant that Max started down in 7th and had to make up some serious ground given Lewis was on pole. Now, thankfully for Max did a lot of work at the start, moving from 7th to 4th, and then he made pretty quick work of Gasly and Alonso, moved into 2nd, but by the time he got back to Lewis, the Merc was already 4 seconds out in front. In the end, Max didn't have the pace to hunt down Lewis, so he opted for that late stop, Paul, to protect his fastest lap. He had it already, but he stopped late to put softs on just in case Lewis threw down a stonking lap, and he'll need to protect it. So he was gunning for it on that final lap. And at that point, it was really all about damage limitation mode for him for most of the race. Max, he did take the fast lap, so that helped. And there's an 8-point gap delta now between the two of them. I thought it was interesting. It was nice of Max in his post-race commentary to really kind of point out and highlight Fernando. He congratulated Fernando. He said that we all, and this is Max's word, he said, we all know how good he is. There's no doubt about that. So it was great to see Alonso on the podium again.
Yeah.
I thought that was nice of him.
Yeah, you don't expect that from Max. Actually, he's really
No.
concerned about other people. It doesn't seem like it anyway. You know?
Yeah, right. And that's why it caught me off guard. That's why I mentioned it,
Yeah.
because it's not something you typically would hear out of Max. And
Yep.
to make a comment about how good Alonso, I thought it was, it's fair on him.
Yeah. No, Max got a perfect start. I mean, a perfect start,
Yeah.
which he needed. I mean, fully focused. It's like he couldn't afford to be P7 coming out of turn 2. That would be. I think eventually it probably still would have made it P2, but making quick work of everyone ahead was very important, and the easiest way to do it is from a great start, and that's exactly what he got. Kept himself out of trouble, picked off the rest of the guys that he needed to on his way up.
Right.
But as I said, I think he was on the limit with the car, just trying to stay up with Lewis. From what I could see, it definitely wasn't turning in the way you'd want it to. It wasn't holding the corner like you wanted to. So he was trying to be creative with his lines to get something out of it, and it just wasn't in the cards. I mean, when early laps, Lewis, as soon as he got in the lead, he was already protecting his tires, right?
Yeah.
And he was able to protect his tires right up until the point where Max, got up to P2. Then Lewis had to step it up a little bit, but he didn't take any edge off his tires either, Lewis. So Max had to get him where he needed to go. So he was always on the back foot there, but to come out with a P2 is super important to keep himself, in the lead, and could easily be in something different. So good for him.
Yeah, that was good. Sergio, he had a little tougher race. Sergio struggles really kind of started with that poor qualifying pole, and he made up a lot of places from P11 early on. Conversely, with Valtteri down at P11, not making up those places. Not so with Sergio. He was the most prolific passer on the day. I thought some of the best action on track was Sergio cutting himself all the way back up to contention. When they stopped him for that second stop, though, Paul, it put him behind the one-stoppers. And just when it looked like he might make the podium in those final laps, chasing or hunting down Alonso for third, that virtual safety car came out that scuttled that notion, leaving him basically on the doorstep of the podium in fourth place. So very difficult race, but, you could say super impressive, and it was, and he passed a lot of people. Had he not had that poor performance on Saturday, he wouldn't have had to do the heroics to get there. But when he needed the heroics, he delivered.
I don't know where his pace is going in qualifying.
Yeah.
It's because as soon as the race starts, like he's completely out of position to the pace that he has, I mean, it wasn't like he was just having a bad weekend. He just had a bad qualifying.
Right.
Because once the green flag dropped, he was going, and he made some incredible passes. It was good. I think, the DRS, sometimes it showed itself to be super effective, but a lot of those passes he did it was just about right if you want to think of it that way. But he really had to fight for those passes he did on the outside of turn 1 and 2 and 3. I mean, he really had to drive that car forward. It wasn't easy, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He really had to drive 100% that whole race, and it was a shame for him that he didn't get the chance to fight Alonso for the P3, because I felt like he deserved it. But that's racing, right? You just never know what's going to happen and how the events are going to turn around. But at least he did get points, and at least he got a lot more points than Bottas did, and that really helps Red Bull.
Yeah, for sure. I guess which prompts the question on.
You like my bass? You like it?
Oh, not so much on Saturday.
Yeah, not Saturday. Yeah. Don't ask that question on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. Also, in other news out of Red Bull, Christian Horner was hauled before the stewards for a comment he made about the penalty.
Is that what they do? Do they go in there, and they grab him by under his shoulders, just kind of drag him to the steward's office. I
Yeah,
love
they
that.
haul him.
That's
haul
a
him
great
off.
word. They hold him. No. Ginger Spice is screaming, stop, that's my husband.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I should have said dragged him. They dragged him before, It's like he got to the court. He was there, but no, he was hauled before the stewards. He made a comment about the penalty and how the race director needed to control the race better in the case of like a rogue marshal waving a flag or something like that. Now, on the surface of it, and there was a lot on social media, and even some of the media pundits were sort of making it sound like you could see where it sounded like it was a personal attack or a personal issue with that particular marshal if you were just reading social media. And to me, I was like, oh, folks, but context here, the context on this issue. What he was saying, if you listen to what he was saying in context, what he was saying is that the DRS was enabled on the track. The data streaming to the drivers, to the team showed it was a green track. Everything was all good to go. And with the slowing car, and the drivers were focused on that as they came around the corner, and not just one marshal stand waving a yellow flag off to the left. And so I agree with him in the sense that Massey has all of that data regarding the green, and you've got one marshal waving a yellow flag, right? And the issue with Christian was saying that the race director needs to make sure that all the marshal stands, that all of the data flowing to the teams, to the drivers, that everything is controlled better. If you've got a marshal waving a flag, then the steering wheel shouldn't be green with DRS activated. Right. And that's what he was saying. He said, what would happen if you had a rogue marshal out there waving a red flag or something because he's confused, and your steering wheel and everything says it's good? He was making a criticism that things need to be ran much tighter. You can't have a marshal out here waving a yellow flag, rightfully so, for a stopped car, while the data and everything streaming to the drivers and the team says the track's green and it's a hot track.
Right.
And so that's what he was saying.
Maybe that's why the debate was taking longer. I don't know, because if the systems weren't working, then do you penalize them? Or,
maybe it was a debate. You're right.
Yeah, you're right. I sort of agree with him. And then, waiting, as Paul, as you just said, maybe that's why it took so, I don't know. But he was saying that the race director needs to have a tighter grasp on what's going on with the data, with the marshals. He made a comment, you have a rogue marshal out, meaning you've got one marshal waving a caution while everything else on the track was a hot track, and that's what you're telling drivers and teams, right? Right.
So that's a problem, and he's right. That is a problem, and that's what Martin Brundle pointed out, and I agree with him, and I think Jensen Button agreed too. Although, I don't know, Simon, tone it down, man. The bias is killing me on the broadcast. Dude, chill a little bit. So I kind of understand. I understand what he's saying, and everybody was teeing off on, Christian Orders, denigrating all marshals. He's not denigrating all marshals. He came out and said, no. Look, what the marshals do, they are incredibly grateful for what all the marshals and volunteers do. Of course he is. That's not what he was saying, but then he was denigrating the FIA and the stewards. Okay, so he wasn't happy with a penalty that came 24 hours after qualifying. Really? Color me shocked. I mean, history, folks, is littered with team bosses slating the FIA and stewards. I mean, take Toto. Remember calling last week's driving that Max did? He said the fact that they didn't call a penalty was, quote, laughable. Is that... that's not being very kind.
It's all part of the game, right? Yeah.
It's part of the game. He was rebuked by Jean Todt. You remember when they released and introduced the halo, and Toto said it's a joke and he would cut it off with a chainsaw if he could? He wasn't endorsing something that the FIA officially released, right?
Right.
Was that healthy for the sport? It created some dissension, The point is, folks, bosses get upset too. And this is nothing new with Christian venting.
Yeah.
I think we can have a little patience. You just hadn't, as we did with Toto last week, or Otmar. Think of Ron Dennis, or how about Paul? One of those famous Ken Tyrrell froth jobs, right? Get
Yes.
one of those. You get Ken up in your
Yes.
grill, you know it. What about Colin Chapman? You think he was always happy with the marshals and
Yeah.
everything? Nicky Lauda, Jackie Stewart wasn't happy. Max Mosley called Jackie Stewart, of all people, a certified half-wit, right? And that's for the
Wow.
president of the FIA.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
folks, it's all part of the game. It's all
Mhm.
part of it. Just stop with the rhetoric and vilifying Christian because he was being critical of the penalty. It happens.
Yep.
Get some context. Next up, the big surprise of the weekend, Paul. Alpine, Fernando Alonso, P3, Esteban Ocon, P5. Look, Alpine had a bit of help with the Bottas and Verstappen penalties. Okay, admittedly. So this left Alonso starting from third, and there was no assurance that Alonso was going to finish in third.
Hmm.
And after passing Gasly, he got up to second at the start of the race, and then he drifted back during the pit stop after his single stop. But he was on a one stopper, Paul, and he marched his way forward and made that work. Fernando
Yeah.
couldn't keep the recovering Verstappen behind him. But in all fairness, he legit worked his way back up to that
Yeah.
podium.
Yeah.
And with Bottas out and Perez on that two stopper, he had to ask Ocon to defend like a lion to keep Perez behind him and off the podium. Now, Esteban did what he could, and there's only so much you can do for that Red Bull and keep
Yeah.
Perez behind him. But the virtual safety car, Paul, came out just when it did, and that did the trick. And that kept Perez behind Alonso, finished third. And as proof that the Alpine car did like this track, and Alonso's podium, sans Perez and Bottas, was proof that on merit, you could look at Ocon's good qualifying pace as well as Alonso's fifth. What a great result for this team and for Fernando.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean they were there on merit. You take Bottas out of it a little bit, but still incredible pace over the rest of the midfield pack, and they ran a great race, great strategy. Alonso was running that one stopper the whole time. I'm really happy Alonso is in third, but can you imagine that last lap battle with Perez coming up behind Alonso and Alonso even on old tires trying to keep a hold of that? But that would have been a last lap to watch. I promise you that. So that would have been interesting. But in the end, I was pretty happy that Alonso managed to secure that. He earned it. The team earned it. It wasn't, they had the pace and they took the opportunity when it was there. And Alonso was very happy, although he had a very potty mouth on, they had to be apologized for.
He did F-bomb there at the end, didn't he?
F-bombs, yeah. You don't see that very often, So he was just excited, man. It's like a guy. He's won a lot of races. He's won 2 championships.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but he just hasn't been there for a very long time. So to be up there at the top, in the top 3, it's got to make him feel good. He's been in and out of Formula One, in and out of different teams, and this is kind of solidifying that he should still be there. But not that we doubted that for a second.
No, it's for sure. And like I said, you could say, well, it was an otherworldly performance by Alonso, and he is Alonso, by the way, and certainly got on third. But like I said, this Alpine car liked this track. Esteban had a great qualifying session, started in a good position, had the pace during the race to finish fifth. Okay, so he couldn't hold off the Red Bull of Sergio Perez. Few could. But Alonso couldn't hold off Max either. All right, so fair enough. But hey, they both held off the AlphaTauri of Gasly and both Ferraris and both McLarens, and that's a great race for them. Okay, put Bottas and Sergio back in third and fourth. They still would have been fifth and sixth. You know?
Yep. And their battle against AlphaTauri in the
That's
championship, super important for them. That's a big haul of points for them to do. And that as we said, they're a factory team. They shouldn't really be messing with the second tier team from Red Bull, but they are, but it's all a part of a big plan because next year everyone's starting with a clean sheet of paper. So hopefully they can really show what they've learned.
Yeah. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll. Where did he finish? I
Sixth.
didn't, sixth. Okay. Yeah, I had it wrong on my notes. And Vettel was in 11th, right?
He finished 10th.
10th. That's right. 10th. Gosh, why didn't I change this in the notes? This is terrible. So 6th and 10th. That's right. So Vettel had a tough start trying to avoid traffic, and he ran wide, dropping him down to 17th, but he did a decent job of recovering up to 10th and a point nonetheless. And when you consider that he made his one-stop strategy on a used set of soft last over half the race, that's a pretty Herculean task given the tire failures later in the race with the other one-stoppers. So, not a great race, but, what he did on a used set of softs is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, for sure. Those tire failures, is it just the tire failing, or is it the driver making a mistake and the tire, when it's marginal, then kind of, losing, getting some issues with it. So maybe it's just about keeping it clean, I think Vettel's been better than not recently. So yeah, I think it was a good drive for Seb. I know Lance was pretty happy with himself after that. He's had an up and down season too. He's been out, lost the plot a few times. So definitely on the sharper side for the Aston Martin team, which is interesting because of, the issues they have with their rake and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's all about handling, etc. So I said that they finally stopped whining and got down to the job of, running a race car, and seems like they do pretty good in a track that you wouldn't think would have been great for the Aston Martin, considering what their deficit they feel is to the higher rate cars.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, Lance to me looked a little bit ragged during the weekend heading up to the race, but come race day, I think he made a really good start, made up a couple places, was showing good pace on his first stint. At a stop, he was able to undercut Sainz's Ferrari. And then hold on to that sixth place.
Yeah.
And that's the first dual points finish since France for this team, Paul.
Wow.
So it's a good result for Lance. He had to manage those tires. That wasn't easy. He had to hold off the Ferraris, which he did very well. So yeah, he should be happy with that result.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of Ferrari, Charles Leclerc in P8, Carlos Sainz in P7. Carlos started on the mediums on the dirty side of the grid after the race control couldn't figure out where he was supposed to start, he or Valtteri. And as they gridded up, and then they had to switch the whole teams. And again, I mean, what is like a clown show out there?
Yeah, yeah.
Either race control was confused or the teams, I don't know what was going on. But anyway, they did get him eventually on the right side of the grid. Sainz had a slow start, made his long first stint work. And when he stopped, he managed his hard tires until he could push. So, that he made that stop, came out on hards and had to manage. And then once he got to the window where he could push, he really started to push. But unfortunately, he was in that DRS train, Paul. Couldn't really make much more out of his race in P7.
Yeah. I think it wasn't the best weekend for Ferrari, obviously.
Yeah.
And, we're growing to expect them to be right there nibbling at the back of the Red Bulls and the Mercedes, if not a bit of drift. But not a good track for them. So that maybe tells something. They haven't quite got that chassis figured out. Obviously, Charles had his issue with the cracked chassis, and didn't know why his car was off pace. And then they found the crack in the chassis, and luckily for him, and that's great. Because he did make some big gains. I don't think Sainz really made a lot of gains during the weekend, but Charles did need to, and did, and it makes him feel better going home right now that they solved what the issue was. Because when you get out of a car and you're like, I don't know, that's not a good place to be. You're like, no. I'm driving well, but I'm a second slower. I can't even tell you what was wrong. And obviously, as tight as everything tolerances are in these cars, one little crack means that if things are moving around a little bit, and that's enough to take a second a lap off a Ferrari. So good for them for figuring it out, and no grid penalty for changing the chassis, which is interesting.
Yeah. And it was probably the right call. They stacked those pit stops. And that was, in hindsight, that was probably the right call, both on the same strategy. So at the end of the day, stacking them and putting in a good performance on the pit stop from the Ferrari team. That was probably the right call, and got Charles, in and amongst it right there with Carlos.
Yeah.
Talk about McLaren. Where is my McLaren? There it is.
Ron.
Talking about McLaren. Lando Norris P9, Daniel Ricciardo in P12. Lando was the only McLaren to score points, leaving Zach Brown to say that their bad luck continued in Qatar. Lando had a good race going on his one stopper and was trying to hold off a recovering Perez, but a slow puncture forced a second stop, leaving him towards the back. Now, in fairness to him, he was towards the back and he fought his way all the way back up to ninth.
Right.
So that was a good result for Lando. He said he was disappointed. He lamented the tire issue, saying that Pirelli should just focus on making better tires because it's dangerous for them to be out there like that. And all I got to say is welcome aboard, Lando, because I've been saying that since 2014. I wish they'd just make great race tires and then let the difference be the drivers and the cars and all that, and not
Right.
inject some artificial wear into the equation. So I'm with you, Lando.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the issue.
I don't know.
When it was
I'm
the
sure he'll
hardest
get
tire they
scolded
make,
for
they
saying
had
that.
on there. Yeah, you're not going to get the free buy two get two free Pirellis this year, Todd.
They won't send him a copy of the Pirelli calendar, the sexy Pirelli calendar.
No. I mean, it's. I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of analysis as to why these punctures were happening, but for the most part, it was happening because guys were making mistakes and hit parts of the track that they shouldn't be hitting. I mean, we've said before, I don't like limit penalties. Let's just make it severe jeopardy if you go off the track at certain points, and severe jeopardy seemed to be happening. I mean, we don't like to see that. Obviously, we don't like to see things fail on the car and everything like that. But it's not like it was. They weren't a part of that equation, I will say. I think all the drivers that ended up having a puncture was not because they kept it on the island the whole time. I think once the tires wear and then they start getting those curb strikes, etc., that definitely increases your percentage of having some kind of failure along the way.
Right. Yeah, Dan had an issue with his fuel. And he had to lift quite a bit for the entire race, which compromised his heroic charge to the points. So it's a tough weekend. And it's been a really tough triple header for McLaren. They entered this triple header really buoyed by their win and Monza and everything. And they're, really seemed to be on song. But basically, on this triple header, they achieved basically to lose the points lead to Ferrari, Paul.
Yeah, I know. It was a shame on Ricciardo because, I mean, I listened to the comments he made afterwards, and I think it was a false reading on the fuel, and he was like, I don't know where the mistake was, but he said at the beginning of the race, I was already having to save fuel. So he never made any progress, which really hurt my fantasy team, by the way. But yeah, I mean, they basically threw a whole race away for Dan. He had to save fuel the whole race, lost position, didn't give him a place to fight. Once they figured out that there was an issue, it was too late, way too late.
Way too late.
And so, I don't know how much fuel was actually left on his car in the end, but it really is a shame that Dan didn't get the chance to fight there. But, he didn't qualify very well either, right? So he shouldn't have been having to fight his way through there. But definitely some issues there on the technical side for McLaren, which basically, as I said, wasted a whole race for Dan.
Yeah, for sure. AlphaTauri Pierre Gasly, P11, Yuki Tsunoda, P13. Pierre started second on the dirty side using a pair of softs, but lost out to Alonso. And the team boxed him pretty early for a two-stopper, which he was committed to. That dropped him further back. He had to fight back through the field, but the second stop put him towards the back once again. And with so many one-stoppers ahead of him, it was going to be tough to get back to the podium or, anywhere close to Alonso, who was on a one-stopper. So that kind of put paid to his race, Paul.
Yeah, it was a bad strategy. It didn't work out for him. Not necessarily just two stopper versus one stopper when they pitted him, but it just seemed that car just didn't have anything after you got one or two laps into a stint on a tire. Because I was expecting when he did that second stop for him to make hay, because he closed up to Vettel and then Vettel pulled away again.
Yeah.
But he had much fresher tires.
Yeah.
So there was something that they got horribly wrong with pressures or setup or something that car could obviously put down a quick lap, as we saw, but 2 or 3 laps in, and he was just going backwards in a hurry. And I don't know what happened to Yuki, if he was having the same issues, because we didn't see him at the sharp end. But for Gasly, I was expecting great things, starting second and in that car, and he'd been handy all weekend long. I was like, wow, he could. Who knows what can happen if he may be able to jump, because wasn't he on the soft tire at the beginning?
He was.
Yes, I mean, he could potentially do everything that Red Bull needs him to do, which is get ahead of Hamilton, but it just wasn't in the cards, and the car was just off. And no matter what he did, and as I said, later in the stint on newer tires, he was still losing ground to Vettel in the Aston Martin. So very strange.
Yeah, it was. And Yuki said that he struggled with the soft tires as well. He was on the same strategy. He lost way too much ground, struggling with those softs. And it's a tough weekend for them, because their fight is with Alpine in the constructors title, and that stung a lot given Alpine's results.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Alfa Romeo, Kimi Räikkönen P14, Antonio Giovinazzi P15. Kimi got a decent start, made up 4 places early on, but their 2-stop strategy didn't work very well either, and it sent him backwards to fight with Latifi. And conversely, Antonio basically had almost the same exact race. Had a good start, gained 4 positions at the beginning, 2-stopper, left and planted at the back, and all the 1-stoppers ahead of him. 14, 15 to where they finish.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same old story for Alfa Romeo, right?
Yeah.
I don't, they just don't have enough. They don't have, the car's not lively enough. They don't have enough performance in it. Occasionally, Kimi will pull something out of his hat, and even Giovinazzi can do something qualifying from time to time, but it's just a lower midfield team right now. So I'm sure Valtteri isn't too excited about that.
I'm sure he is. So, the big revelation out of the weekend was that Haas F1 beat Williams. You had Mick Schumacher in P16, Nikita Mazepin in P18. Mick jumped Latifi at the start, later fell backwards, but he said that he had a sniff of the Alphas, so that was good. He felt good. He said the car felt much better this weekend, so he was pretty happy with the performance. Nikita stopped later than Mick did and was running ahead of Mick for quite a while, because he made his tires last longer than anyone except Bottas. And then he boxed late. But even despite that long run, he couldn't gain enough really running that long. Unfortunately, he didn't have the pace to really make it work. So when he boxed, Mick got back around. But Gunther said it was one of the better races of this year because they beat Williams. So there you go.
Well, yeah. Obviously, Williams had their troubles, but I don't think as they beat them, but they finished ahead of them.
They finished ahead of them, yeah, right.
But what one thing to point out in the Haas is the differential is a lot smaller now, right? I mean, as you say, Mick Schumacher is hanging on to the Alphas.
Yeah.
Is that the car? Because I didn't think the car was really under any kind of development at all. Or is this purely the effect of these young drivers getting more experience and being able to tackle a Grand Prix weekend better and better? I mean, that's basically what the Haas said this year was about, right? It wasn't about the car.
That's right. That's what Gunther said at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
I think right now those, certainly Mick Schumacher, we've all got opinions about Mazepin there, but definitely learned a lot. And I think, that for them to be as close as they are on a week in, week out basis right now is actually a pretty positive sign. And let's hope the Haas, the lack of resources they put into this year is really going to pay off next year. Let's hope so, right?
Right. Williams, George Russell, P17, Nicholas Latifi, DNF. George suffered a puncture late in the race. This dropped him to the back from an otherwise decent race I thought he had going. He limped it back to the pits for the new tires and new nose, and that left him pretty much at the back. Latifi, same issue. Just like a lap or so after that, had the punctured tire. He could not make it back to the pits, stopped out on track in a runoff area, which prompted the virtual safety car that scuttled Sergio's chance to go after a podium. And so they finished.
And he's got a Williams, and he's got a Mercedes engine in the back of that thing.
He does have a Mercedes.
Coincidence? Come on,
put your conspiracy
hat on.
Yeah.
Let's think. I say Hufflepuff. Mhm.
There you go. So that's how they finish. This is what we think about how they finish. And you can share your opinion on what you think about how they finish. But let's give out some awards because that's typically what we tend to do on a race review.
Yes.
Move of the race, Paul. Who'd you have move of the race?
That's a few. I mean, obviously Perez had a bunch of moves out there, right?
That's who I had. I had Perez on
Did
everyone.
you? Okay,
Yeah.
but I did not have Perez because I
Oh,
went
good
a
for
little
you.
different because
You went a little deeper than that, Paul.
I went a little deeper than that, and I went with Ocon on Perez because when we were talking about moves of the race, pivotal
Yes.
points, if he hadn't have done that,
Repassed him.
and repassed him, even though he had a car that didn't have the tires, didn't have the grip, he just kind of lunged it in there.
Yeah.
Knew it wasn't going to really help his position. He wasn't really fighting position. He was just fighting Perez to slow him down, and he did that. It seemed like Perez had taken care of him pretty quickly, but then Ocon just gave it everything to get back by and really made it difficult for Sergio. So that, easily filling up a couple of seconds of time that Sergio didn't have to give, which would have put him a lot closer to Alonso in those closing moments. So I think even though he didn't hold him off very long, I think it was very crucial what
Just
Ocon
enough.
did to give Alonso that podium slot.
Yeah. So Esteban repaying the favor that Alonso did for Esteban.
Right. Somewhat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was fun to see Ocon just running over to Alonso at the end and congratulate him. I loved that stuff amongst the teammates. It can be so different between teammates, but it's good to see.
Yeah, it's a marked difference between Alonso and Hamilton in 07.
Just they're running at each other, but with a different outcome once they
not
got
with
to each
loving
other.
arms. Yeah, that was good. All right, next word is donkey of the race.
We'll do it live!
All right, who'd you get? Donkey of the race.
I got a couple of options here.
Oh boy.
I'm just 50-50 on it because I got honestly McLaren with the Ricardo fuel issue, chasing a phantom fuel issue that basically completely scuppered his race.
Yeah.
Or of course, once again, my old punching bag Bottas. I mean, underachieving in every aspect of his weekend.
Ouch. Poor Valtteri.
Is Bottas going to make the top 10 drivers of the year?
Yeah, that's tough. Hey, I love you, Valtteri. Don't take it. Just don't take it too hard.
Yeah.
Paul means well. It's meant to be a constructive. Oh, do you? Constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Oh boy, it's a kinder, gentler Paul Valtteri.
Yes. Yeah.
So my donkey, the FIA and the stewards for handing out Saturday penalties on a Sunday. That's tacky.
Yeah.
Tacky for me.
Yeah.
All right. Then finally, drive of the race. Good God.
Get down. Get down.
Echt in de race.
That's right.
That's
Drive
right.
of the race. Who are you giving it to, Paul?
I got to give it to Fernando.
That's what I gave it to. Fernando.
Why not?
Yeah, he
Great
deserves
drive,
it.
Fernando. I mean, just astounding. Holding them off. Great
That's
pace. Great qualifying. Podium.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear the podium, Fernando? It was a great result. All right, that's who I give it. Hey, real quick, I want to mention. I had a gentleman, Ethan Gibson at EAG Create, reach out to me, and he is an artist, and he creates custom art pieces, some motorsport art pieces, and he reached out to us and he said, "Hey, I have been a longtime listener of the show," and so he reached out and he said, "Would you be willing to do a drawing? And I would be more than happy to have a custom hand-signed piece of my artwork for one of your supporters in a drawing and send that to him." And I thought that,
I was thinking you were going to ask me to draw something. I was like, well, that's not really. You wanted me to draw a picture of you? I don't
Stick
know.
figures, yeah.
That's not really very valuable.
Well, I asked him. It's Ethan Gibson, EAG Create, and I
EAG
posted.
Create,
And I posted this story on our website, so you can go find examples of his artwork, links to his website. But I'm happy to say that I did a drawing, and our friend Ilya in Australia won. longtime supporter. You may know as Gigi the cat on our website.
Ah, Gigi the cat.
Gigi the
Okay,
cat.
yeah.
Long time, huge supporter of the Parc Fermé and a Patreon supporter. So this was just for Patreons only. And so congratulations to Gigi the cat. And thank you. And then thank you to Ethan Gibson for what
Yeah,
a lovely
absolutely.
gift. A
That's
wonderful
amazing.
gift, wonderful guy. And I want to say personally hello to his wife, who is also a listener, and bless her heart. So hello and thank you to you and your wife for being gracious enough to offer this custom artwork piece, this gift signed by you guys, and then sending it to such a dear supporter of the Parc Fermé. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, guys,
That's a
for doing
perfect
that.
scenario right there. That's
It
awesome.
is. It's wonderful, wonderful scenario. And one of our listeners giving a bespoke custom piece to another longtime listener and supporter, and it's great.
That's great.
Just part of the TPF community. So thank you to both of you for doing that. All right, let's do some mailbag. Paul, we got some great questions.
You've got mail.
Yes.
The first
yes.
one up, Brian asks, "Hey Todd and Paul, I was wondering your thoughts regardless of this year's outcome. Do you think this could be Lewis's last best chance of winning a championship with the new regulations and George being his teammate next year? As always, love the show and never miss it." Well, thanks, Brian. And it's a great question, Paul. What do you think?
You're asking. That's predicting what Mercedes is going to be like in the next 2 years, and I've got a feeling they're going to be pretty handy. So I definitely don't think it's Lewis's last hurrah, and I think that's a good reason why Lewis didn't call it quits at the end of this year, right?
I think so.
Although it's a bit of a safety net for in case because he does want to get that 8th championship, right? So no, I definitely it's a great chance for Lewis to still nail it this year, but I still think he's going to have plenty of opportunity in the next 2 races, 2 years as well. So
I agree with you, Paul. I don't think Mercedes will be that far off the mark next year with the new regulations. You know, this is a pretty daunting team that you know, all the men and women that work at that team, all the names that we don't know at that team. Oh, that's my dog.
Walkie's time.
Yeah, it is. That's him. Yeah, he's upset.
You got the cutest dog.
Yeah, he's a hoot. I may need to get my wife in to take him out. All right. He's ready to go out. Sorry, folks. Yeah. That's the organic nature of the podcast. What are you going to do? He was, you know, he was over there sleeping. You know the old adage, let a sleeping dog lie. So I've been leaving him there and letting him enjoy and sleep. So
yeah, my dog's been playing little tiny pitter-patter of tiny feet all around right now.
See,
he's ready for dinner too.
He's polite. He's not quite the vocal one I am. So anyway, yeah, I agree with you. I think Mercedes in this case isn't going to be far off the mark. I do think George is going to be a little bit of a handful because I think George is uber talented. But you can't put it past the wily veteran Lewis. I mean, Lewis is awesome, and you know, I think he'll have some lessons for George in racecraft.
Yes.
So
but
I don't think
Lewis
it's his last chance.
Yeah, Lewis has had some history with when he's had really capable teammates for it to be quite an abrasive situation. Right?
Yes, he has. So you think of Lonzo, you think of Rosberg.
Right.
Jensen Button beat him that year, and he wasn't too happy about that. And you notice when people ask Jensen, and he's talking about Lewis, he's always very polite, very kind. But you can tell there's an undertow in what Jensen thinks about Lewis.
Yeah.
So
and we know from George, as we've learned to know him, he's not going to come in there to just back up Lewis.
No, he's not going to do it.
You know, I mean,
nor should he.
No, he definitely shouldn't. But that is definitely not going to. It's not going to be his learning year. Oh, hi, gee shucks, everybody. You know, I just want to support the team. He's there to give him the opportunity to start winning races and championships at the beginning.
Right. My one piece of advice for George is do a Lewis.
Hmm.
You go in there and knock his feet off the desk, just like he did with Alonso at McLaren. You got to do that. You cannot go in there and play wet nurse or be his quote wingman. That's what Valtteri did, and you see what happened there. That will happen to you if you don't go in there with the express intent of knocking Lewis's feet off at the desk, just like Nico Rosberg did. You're going to have to do that if you want to own that team and you want to win championships. That's what you got to. And I know
Yep.
George knows that, but. Anyway, I'm not lecturing George. George is brilliant. He knows what he's doing. But that's what you got to do. Lando's doing it with Dan. You got to do it there, right? Max has done it with every teammate he's had. And so to that point, though, Brian, I do think there is a shelf life here. Either Lewis's own personal interest and passion for the sport could wane in the next year or two.
Hmm.
And I could really see Lewis wanting to do something else, with his life.
I could definitely see that. If he gets another
Yes.
championship, I could see that happening rapidly.
Rapidly. I could too. I really could, because Lewis is, in the grand context of it, Lewis is still young. He's still a young guy. But when you've got Max, George, Lando, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, you've got some of these incredibly talented young, Pierre Gasly, some of these incredibly talented young guys. After a little while, it's like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Right.
These
Right.
these youngsters are fast.
Yep.
So anyway, great question, Brian. Let's go to the next one. Matt Jones asks, "Hey guys, enjoying the pod as usual. Do you think there will be a bit of a taint on whoever wins the championship in the end this year, with all the controversy surrounding Max Robust defending multiple times, bendy wings on both cars, unreal engines, the Silverstone incident?" Does this leave it open to sour grapes from the eventual loser? I can't imagine Kristen taking the loss very well this year. The only real bad luck gripe was Max and Baku. Everything else has been tit for tat. Or is all fair in love and war? What do you think?
I mean, it's, historically, a championship isn't always won by pure dominance. There's always some luck. Even, one of my heroes, James Hunt, right? I mean, no one questions James Hunt as being a world champion, but when you look at it, he beat Niki Lauda, who nearly died during the middle of the season and didn't race in all the races, and won it by the skin of his teeth, but no one takes it away from him, right? So, and there was clashes, and there was politics, and there was, cars getting disqualified and all kinds of stuff during that season. Nothing took away from that season. It shows in the Rush movie there. Everyone can get to see kind of a good idea of how and why that happened. And throughout, the history of Formula One, there's always this ebb and flow, and things happen, and there's something untoward happening. There's bad luck, et cetera, et cetera. Even when Rosberg beat Lewis, there was some. Lewis didn't have the reliability that year, but no one's going to take that away from Rosberg, because he had to be there and jump on the opportunity that was there. And there's always that happen in a season, in Formula One, in any series, where there's reliability issues, there's crashes, there's incidents, there's intrigue. And that's what makes it such a great sport. So I don't think it takes away from anything, no matter who ends up winning the championship.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It takes a season to win a championship. Great question though, Matt. I agree that Miles asks, how do you go about learning a new track? How many laps does it normally take for you to feel comfortable pushing it for a hot lap? Well, Miles, I am absolutely no help, because I'm not a professional driver. The good news is Paul is a professional race car driver, and he's had to learn lots of new tracks. So Paul, tell us what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, it's harder the older you get, I'll tell you that. Not necessarily learn the track, to be able to push that boundary earlier when you do have a kind of a clue as to what to do. I mean, it's different. This process has evolved, right, with simulators, etc. I mean, I know Ross Gunn, right? One of the things that amazed me about him jumping in the hard racing Aston Martin, getting to all these tracks that he's never been to before, and are very different from the European tracks.
Yeah.
Be able to get a hold of it in like 5 laps. He pretty much had everything, but it's a lot of dedication and work too. It's not just a natural ability to learn a track. It's a lot of hard work before you get to the track. It's really being in tune and being focused on those very first laps to really pick out everything you need to know and block out things you don't need to know, so you can get to the nitty gritty of each track and each corner as soon and as quickly as you can, because there's a lot of white noise on a weekend.
Yeah.
And you can even, and there is on a track, you really have to simplify a track down to the edge of the road and the apex, but there's a lot of other things going on. There's other cars out there, there's everything. But if you can really be super fine in tune with it, I think easily you should be able to get a really, really close within 10 laps. And then it's just about figuring out what to do to the car to get the best out of it.
Interesting. So, because it did seem that they learned this track pretty darn quick,
right?
You know? And back in the old days, though, in the older days, not putting you to an age, but back in the old days, the oldie timey days,
when it was black and white and
when
wagon wheels.
Back when you drove cars with square wheels.
Yeah, that 30-inch wheels. I don't know how we ended up being 13, but they're very, very, very not much tread depth. Yeah.
Right. But back in those days, so you would show up at a new circuit. How long did it take you before you were like full tilt hot lap?
I'm not saying it wouldn't take me longer than 10 laps. Actually, I mean, you kind of get a gist of a corner, and as long as I always said, if you know the car and you don't know the track, or you know the track and don't know the car, you can get there pretty quick, right? So the big thing is, you know, the focusing and you know what type of corner. If you're in a car, you know what its threshold is. You push pretty hard, because there's no point in, you don't drive around just going, oh, there's the apex, that's nice, oh, maybe I'll track out there, because you can't tie those things together till you really get the car to the limit anyway. The apex will move. You know, we do track walks, right? And that's a very nice apex right there. When you get in the throes of it, you're nowhere near it, because of how the car feels and how much grip there is, and you get a feel for the flow, and you're always working. You know, I'm always working on apex out and momentum apex out, right? And so that's what you're aiming for, and you do whatever you can at the beginning of the corner to get that momentum and get on the power as early as you can and carry that momentum out of the corner. So you just keep working back from the exit, so to speak. That makes sense.
Yep.
And you know, visuals are everything. You don't drive by driving from point to point to point. You look at the big picture and you look ahead. So it's not like the corner's a surprise to you, unless it's, you know, that's why street circuits are harder, because there's a lot of blind turns. But if you're on a track with some open, you know, like Qatar was, right? You could see nearly the whole track. As long as you can see the trajectory of the corner, you know the car you're in, you kind of know what gear this corner is, you can get there pretty darn fast. So I would say if I knew the car, and then usually I did, I could get there easily within 10 laps. But if you went to a new track and a new car, it can take a little time.
Interesting. Great question, Miles.
Great question. We've had some great questions recently. I've been loving it. Yeah, really cool.
We had a lot of people asking questions.
Keep them coming.
Yeah, very good questions too. So, okay, Cam asked, just curious, will George Russell get the wrong tire strategies, bad wheel nuts, and horrible team decisions that Bottas gets? Don't get me wrong, he's not up to Hamilton's standards, but it still seems if anything Mercedes goes wrong, it's always on Bottas's side. Love the show. Congrats, Paul, on the Petite, the win at Petite.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great question, Kim, and there was this notion, if you go back to the halcyon days in Ferrari from 2000 to 2004, it always seemed like if something went wrong at Ferrari, it would happen to Barrichello, you know, not Michael's car, but it would happen to Barrichello's car. And it just kind of seems that way. And to be honest with you, it kind of seems that way in the last since 2014 at Mercedes too, except that year that Nico won. You know, Lewis had some issues with his cars, but it always seems like if it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong for Lewis's teammate, you know?
Yes.
There's just that notion happens, I guess, Paul. It's just that those title contenders, you know, maybe there's a level of detail and double checking and triple and quadruple checking everything. Maybe there's a level of detail that just happens. to a title contender's car that may not to his teammate. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's not made up that, if you're on a car that's the world champion is driving, you may be taking that extra little bit of time and maybe thinking of it. Also, maybe the team puts the best people on the championship car too, right?
And
they pay more attention to it. There's definitely not they're trying to scupper Bottas and putting something on his car that's going to break. Both sides of the garage are doing everything they can. But there's just something about, just that last little thing. I don't know. It's hard to, if you asked anybody, they'd say, hell no.
No.
Right? And mechanic from an engineer, whatever. But if you know that you stay out that extra 10 minutes, you do this, that this car is going to win a race for you rather than just be second or third, it's there. It's a reality. Yeah.
It is. It's an interesting notion because it does seem like that, but there is these arguments that people have made, and I've seen some fans that are newer to F1 that kind of see these issues that crop up for maybe Valtteri or in even back in the day with Michael. And they say, "Oh my gosh, they're purposely scuttling Valtteri's race or Rubens' race or Mark Webber's race, right? With Sebastian Vettel. They may run alternate strategies that complement Lewis, and it's a strategy designed to buttress Lewis's strategy if Valtteri performs at the level that they need him to perform at. Very much with Sergio and Max, or very much with Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel, or whatever it might be. Now, the other driver doesn't like being used and their strategy being a complementary strategy to the team leader, but that's kind of the harsh reality. But the allegations that they'd purposely ruin a race makes no sense because Mercedes needs both cars to finish 1-2 for the Constructors' Championship because that's where all the money's made, right? Yeah. So they purposely wouldn't kill their own chances of being the Constructors' Champion in order to do that. So anyway, it's a great question though.
And then that's, we're going back to George. That's something he's going to set that tone the day he walks in.
That's right.
It's like you need to get your guys, your side of the garage, working harder, and just say, but he's setting the stage by how he behaves, how late he stays, how he talks to people. Get the support. It's not just about being a nice guy and having people like you.
No,
it's about pushing everyone, but pushing yourself as an example to lead with. Right. Very important how he sets that stage early on in the season next year.
Yeah, which is what Michael did. He was staying late, working with them, and I think, to be honest, I think Lando does a little bit of that. Himself. So and Max. So anyway, great question. Great race. A lot of fun, but let us know what you think about it. You can go to theparcfermé.com, share your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility. That's the one rule we have. No personal attacks. Disagree all you want. That's fine. We could totally disagree and still enjoy each other's company. So perfectly fine. If you like the podcast, you can go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, give us a little love over there. Huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. We could not and would not do this podcast without you. And Paul, you get a reprieve, my friend.
Into the day off now, I'll finally be able to catch up on the British baking show. And Grace said, oh my God, the drama. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't been able to catch up. I'm going to start working on that.
No podcasts to do. You get a break. It's wonderful.
I do.
But we'll be back again with the inaugural Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. So that'll be fun in a couple weeks, in a fortnight's time. But until that time, I'll find Grace and we'll be back next week to do it all over again. Until that time, this is Todd, a Negative Camper, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.